It's been a little while since we were in the Beatitudes, so I thought it's worth our while just revisiting the whole series. But I particularly wanted to say that it is a series. There is a connection between each one of them. This is not a list of random sayings. And I think for anyone who looks at the Bible as an inspired text, it seems to me an obvious conclusion to come to that it is a series. It's not just something that's been put together sort of willy-nilly all over the place, and it doesn't matter what order it's in. There's very definitely an order to it. So, the first four, as we've gone through this, we've noticed a couple of things. We've noticed the fact that these first four are expressed in a negative form. There is something that is missing here. And it's an awareness of that thing that is missing that is so important. What I see in this is just the recognition of the state of our lives. It's an inner acknowledgement that of myself, I don't possess what is true and what is good. And then flowing from that, the way that leads to our external actions and what we do with it. Now, I think this is what's reflected in these first four. The inner acknowledgement and then the external action of both truth and good. And then we move on to the next three. And we're slap bang in the middle of this three at the moment. And these are expressed in positive terms. These are statements of being. This is what a person is, rather than the lack. And what we see here is a manifestation of something, a manifestation of a character. So what I'm going to suggest is that the first group is a regenerating, it's a process phase. Whereas the second group is what we'd call regenerate or regeneration as it exists as a state of being. The first group is a way of expressing that what is good and positive actually goes against everything that I experience as being of myself. This goes against our desires, our inclinations, and often our actions. And this is spiritual work. We talked last time about temptation. This is temptation taking place. And it kind of equates to the 6 days of work prior to the Sabbath. The 6 days of creation. This is where much of our effort is expended. And it requires an obedience to an external authority because the authority does not yet exist within our lives. I do not, of myself, do these things that are being required of me. But the second group is where those principles to which we were obedient previously actually reign in our lives, and they determine everything that we do, everything that we love, everything that we think. We do act as the Lord talks to the Pharisees on the Sabbath day, but we don't act from self, we act from the Lord who flows through us. It's a recognition that what is good and what is true within us is of the Lord. It's not of ourselves, but everything of ourselves has been put aside and it no longer stands in the way of the flow. As we read Swedenborg, he talks about the way that the first state that we go through, the regenerating state, is a state in which truth leads, and it leads towards what is good. So this is this state of obedience where I know something in my head is true and I have to compel myself to do it because I don't feel like doing it. but that compulsion, that obedience is a central part of that experience. So we see the reality of our state, we see everything that we lack, we recognize what is true, and we compel ourselves to go down that route of what is true and what is good, although it contradicts everything that my soul screams at me. The second state is a state of good which leads to truth. It's the reverse. And of course, it's not our good, it's the Lord's good. But because that reigns supreme in our heart, that leads to a new understanding. So, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy, is an expression of the new will the Lord provides us with. And the second, the one we're on today, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, is an expression of the understanding which comes from that new will. This speaks of a transformation of the way we look at the world. So let's just consider some of the words in this particular beatitude. Blessed are the pure. And this word can be translated as clean, pure, unstained, guiltless, innocent, or upright. Now just think about some of those words at the moment and think of some of the connotations in there for the Jewish law, for the Pharisees, the idea of being clean and unclean. You can see how important this word is. But then bear in mind the second part of the phrase, the pure in heart. So we're not talking about an adherence to an external code of conduct or an external law. We're not talking about the external purity of the Pharisees. So we read this morning from Matthew chapter 12. The Pharisees said, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." And Jesus' response, "If you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Now, as I mentioned, this is a common theme through the Gospel. So elsewhere in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also." Now I want to reiterate, we are not clean in and of ourselves. Any cleanliness or purity we have comes from the Lord and the Lord alone, when what is of ourselves is set aside. And the other thing that I want to recognize about this beatitude is the blessing that is promised is actually counterintuitive. If we look at the benefits that are promised by the previous beatitudes, for example, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. There's an obvious connection there. But with this one, it's not the case. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The promise is a clarity of vision, a clarity of view that we might not normally expect. Now, Swedenborg uses this word perception. Perception is a certain inward feeling wholly from the Lord as to whether a thing is true and good. This is what's being spoken of here. This is not a learned knowledge. It's not a rationality. It's a seeing of something. This is kind of fundamental to the switch between those two groups of Beatitudes. The first group was to learn the truth, and that learnt truth leads you to what is good. This group is to have goodness established in your life, and that leads you to a whole new perception of the world around you. So, who knew that a change of heart can lead to looking at the world in an entirely new way? It's not at all obvious to us. We get so wrapped up in our learning and our thinking ability that we don't actually realise that the true perception doesn't come from ourselves at all, it comes from the Lord. I just want to share one more passage with you. Again, Matthew's Gospel. This is back into the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says this, "And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me remove the speck from your eye,' and look, a plank is in your own eye? Hypocrite! First remove the plank from your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye." Do you see how it calls you to a change of perception? And the change of perception is brought about by establishing what is good from the Lord in your life as the central thing, the determining factor. I just want to say, just thinking about that passage from Moses, I presume everybody had heard that story of Moses speaking to the Lord and wanting to see the Lord, because he's wanting that certainty that the Lord is going to carry them forward into the promised land. And the Lord makes this comment that you cannot see God and live. And one of the applications of that, I think, is that the natural person that we are dies and is set aside if we see heavenly truth. You know, we have stories of people who go through near-death experiences, for example, who come out of those experiences with an entirely changed attitude to life, a new way of looking at things. They don't have the same fear of death, etc. But there's something of a compulsion in that, because this is an experience that has kind of just landed in their lap. They haven't chosen it. What the Lord seeks for us is for us to choose this state. So he doesn't confront us with truth. He seeks to give us choice in the matter so that it truly becomes part of our life and who we really are. I want to say also that this state of perception is not a state that I think we consistently enjoy. The ability to see the truth, I think we get glimpses of it, but I don't know that very many of us reach that state where we can say, I can always see the truth. I think we have to be very careful with this idea of perception and seeing the truth, that we can sometimes use it as a way of just propping up our own attitudes to things. But I think actually once we've reached that perception state, there's a great deal about the things that we used to believe that we will recognise are wrong. So that state of perception will first and foremost tell us our own problems before we start then seeing it in other people. There's just one other thing I wanted to mention. It's kind of off on a tangent in a way. During the week, various newsletters from the various sister congregations around the country have landed in my inbox. And I just wanted to mention Hurstville, the Hurstville Society. Todd Beiswanger's latest article, if anybody has read it, is absolutely excellent. He talks about the idea that we have the lovely concept that God is love. But he says this can be a bit of an Achilles heel for the new church, because we can then start using that idea as a way of kind of excusing people and in a way excusing ourselves. What he focuses on as the heart and core of New Church teaching is regeneration. The process that the Beatitudes that we've seen today lead us through. It will bring about an entirely new perception and perspective when we recognise that our teachings are actually not just nice ideas. They're not just about, being friendly and nice to everybody. They're actually about challenging our lives. They're actually about making us act in ways entirely opposite to the way we feel we want to act at times. And seeing the world in a way which is often entirely different from the way we want to see it.